Hello, everyone. I'm Vince. I've been using Rails since 2011. This is my first time at the conference and my first time giving this talk, so I'm a little nervous because of that, but mostly because this topic around diversity, inclusion, and equity can often feel uncomfortable at times. So I just want to acknowledge that everybody's here and that you're here to have this conversation. I'm excited to share the lessons that I've learned in diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm not nearly as funny as Julian Sock. I don't have as many Queer Eye gifts, so you have to forgive me for that. So I want you to leave here in the next 40 minutes feeling like you've been equipped with some knowledge and that you're empowered with just my personal story and that you're emboldened to act. I am not an expert in diversity, equity, or inclusion. I do not do workshops or anything like that. I lead a team of engineers at Clockwork, a local agency here in the Twin Cities. And I'm new to this journey. I'm still learning. I'm making mistakes. And I'm also being vulnerable. And I don't have the solution for solving diversity in technology. We're not going to solve that today. But I want everyone to be able to do something after this talk to just act, and just take a step in that spectrum of inclusion, and just to do something. And that's why I've called this talk Enter the Danger. So let's equip you with some knowledge. We're at RailsConf, we're here to learn, and I just want to have a very basic shared understanding of what actually diversity, inclusion, and equity mean. So diversity is the range of human differences, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, social class, physical ability or attributes, religious or ethical values systems, national origin, and political beliefs. It's really the presence of individuals from various backgrounds and or with various identities. Inclusion is recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It's an inclusive organization that promotes and sustains a sense of belonging. It values and respects the talents, beliefs, and backgrounds and ways of living of its people. There's a lot of metaphors for diversity and inclusion. One that I like is around, they call it the crayon box, where diversity is all the colors of the box, and inclusion is coloring with all of those things. You could also look at it as diversity is measured and inclusion is felt. And a lot of organizations that scale measure their diversity metrics. I had the chance to meet the outgoing CEO of Best Buy, and what Hubert Joly has done is to completely turn around the business to become more profitable. And their diversity metrics show. There's more women in positions of leadership, people of color in positions of leadership and management. But something problematic about diversity metrics is that if you focus too much on those things, you err on the side of tokenizing people and making them feel tokenized. It also doesn't acknowledge that we're humans, that are complex and have different backgrounds, different communication styles. You have different experiences, and you might or might not have kids. And that's the problem with at least diversity metrics. When you're asking somebody to check a box, male or female, that is not inclusive for somebody that would identify as non-binary. A lot of companies talk about diversity and inclusion, but equity is really the thing that ties it together. I'm not going to read through this definition of equity because I find it verbose, but I am going to share a diagram with you that helps explain what equity means. There's a common misconception that equity and equality are the same thing. They're not. Equality is giving everyone the same thing. And you could see the graphic on the far left. Everyone's given this box to see this baseball game. And in equity, you help and acknowledge that not everyone is born into this world with the same privilege, with the same opportunities, with the same access. And equity is that principle that gives the person what they need. So in the middle graphic, you could see the person on the far right can see the baseball game, they could participate. The person in the middle could still see it, and the person on the left is not standing like a creep way over the fence like in the first photo. And when you start breaking down the barriers of patriarchy and racism, you're removing that fence. And that's what this was so important about this far concept on the right called liberation. And those are the three concepts that I think are very core. And I think we talk about them, but I don't often think that there's a shared understanding of what those things mean. So I want to just share my personal story. Like I said, I'm not an expert in this topic, but I've taken diversity training. It's given me some new lens. I've made mistakes, and I'm still learning. And I think it's valuable to teach something that you've just learned because you have some empathy around what that actually means. And so there was a great talk earlier around learning to teach, and I'm very much doing that right now. So I'm a first-generation Filipino-American. I was born in Michigan. My parents came here from the Philippines, and all my life I've been subject to this concept of the model minority, where Asians are perceived to be smart, wealthy, hardworking, docile, submissive, that we're like whiz kids or musical geniuses, that we have tiger moms forced to make kids work really hard, that we work in medicine and accounting. And this is something that I played into. Like, I actually was oppressing myself. And I think a lot of Asian Americans, I'm not going to speak for all of them, but I know the people that I know, we've definitely conformed into this, and we reinforce the stereotype of the Asian American. I was really good at like karate, and I loved it, and I loved sharing that with people. I'm actually quite good at video games, and if you're behind me in a TSA pre-check line, I'm like really fast. Like, you want to be behind me. We're kind of like Vulcans in Star Trek. We're like, have our own martial arts, and we like live forever, like Vulcans. And I also had that haircut as a kid. But it's a myth, and it really ignores the diversity of Asian cultures. I'm Filipino-American, but I've always started to call myself as Asian American. And we are not all equal. And it doesn't acknowledge the fact that Asian Americans come from different parts of the world. And it perpetuates this myth that Asian Americans are perpetual foreigners. I can't tell you how many people are like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Michigan. I was born in Kalamazoo. Like, I'm from here. And it really feels like it erases racism from Asian Americans. The first time I saw Crazy Rich Asians, I like cried. I felt that same experience that my mom felt when she watched the Joy Luck Club back in whenever that movie came out. And it's powerful to see yourself, and it's powerful to see yourself be seen, especially on the big screen. And while I'm not Chinese, it was awesome to see people portrayed in a way that's not aligned with typical stereotypes. And so all my life I've been kind of fighting this, and my whole family is made up of doctors and nurses, so naturally I chose not to go into that, and I went into real estate. So I spent 7 years working as a real estate broker in Chicago renting apartments. I would post ads like this up on Craigslist, 4 photos. I would answer my phone and show them an apartment and rent it. My original background in college was computer engineering, but I really didn't like the way they approached that. And so I worked as a real estate broker. I learned at some point in 2007 that I could embed H2LS and images into a Craigslist ad, and instead of being constrained to 4 low-resolution photos, I could put as many photos as I wanted in full screen, high-resolution width. This had a big impact on my real estate practice at the time, and I got tons of calls from it, made a lot of commissions, and a lot of people took interest, and I started showing different agents in my office how to do it. I was teaching people how to code in H2L and CSS, and I helped my apartment broker build the application for this. This emboldened me to move back into software development and give it another crack. And so I found these 2 entrepreneurs from Northwestern, Neil Solis-Griffith and Mike McGee, who were starting this thing called Code Academy in 2011. It was the first coding school of its kind, and is arguably the first, before even the term boot camp was created. It was 33 of us who all basically quit our jobs and gave these 2 entrepreneurs $8,000 each to help them teach us HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Rails. We had an amazing teacher, Jeff Cohen in the middle, who did a wonderful talk on modern cryptography at the beginning of the conference. He's the best teacher I've ever had. He created an environment that was transformational. It was very inclusive, and I'd say that's partly because of the founders as well. They made us feel like we had a sense of belonging, and my big takeaway from this experience was that students flourished in an environment where there was a safe environment where they could expose their ignorance, have ownership over what they were doing, and that you were making an impact and having a sense of belonging. I joined the startup, I worked for them for 4 years, and I brought that experience to about 2,000 people for 4 years teaching Rails to people who've never learned how to code before. Something that we saw with our demo day teams at Code Academy, which we later called the Starter League, is that they demonstrated the traits of high-performing teams. This is Project Aristotle, a research study that Google spent 2 years doing, looking at 180 teams. And they found 4 pretty common things that they were expecting to find, but not the 5th one, which is psychological safety. And psychological safety is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. I guarantee you not everybody feels safe in their workplace. And that's why this conversation of inclusion is so important. People don't feel safe to have conversations, and there's needs to be a change around that. I took the lessons that I learned at Starter League, and I moved on to my next startup, which is called Matter. It's a corporate accelerator and healthcare incubator in Chicago where I supported healthcare entrepreneurs. We basically connected healthcare entrepreneurs with strategic partners to help them pilot and commercialize their technologies by helping them connect with folks like Walgreens, Abbott Labs, AbbVie, so that they could build their startups. If you know anything about healthcare, if anybody's in rooms in healthcare, it takes a long time to build a product and get that into market. I mentioned I met the outgoing CEO of Best Buy, and something that he did was really introduce divergent thinking into Best Buy's culture. And that's very much the recipe that you see in innovation and ecosystems that have startups, is that bringing strategic partners from corporations, startups, entrepreneurs, community players, that type of divergent thinking is what actually creates innovation, not technology. Technology is what enables it, but divergent thinking, design thinking has shown us that bringing those things together and bringing that rich opinion from different perspectives and different walks of life is what allows us to come up with new ideas. And I work with a lot of companies that want to talk about digital transformation, and it's always, everybody still thinks that it's about technology. It's about changing a mindset. So you might be asking, why do you care about this, Vince? I care about this because I'm intrinsically motivated. I've joined a startup that's not a startup, but a company here in Twin Cities that's really inspiring to work with. But I also have a really strong intrinsic motivator, which is my child. This is Lane. This is at his birthday last month. He turned 2. And he was born into this world at the time that I was observing a lot of polarization. I want him to live in a world where it's not like this. And after I wrapped up at my last company, I wanted to join a company that was very much values-driven, had a strong vision, and was inclusive. And I was looking at companies. I only interviewed with one company when I was moving here from Chicago last year, and I fortunately got the job with a company called Clockwork. This company is amazing. It's driven by leaders who really opt in and really understand what allyship means. We've developed a race equity culture that goes beyond a project or initiative. We practice allyship. We take action by inspiring our community and having events for free at our space. We openly talk about mental health and self-care at our staff meetings. And we have a flexible work policy that is empowering for parents. Something that I did at Clockwork last year was this project around inclusive naming. So in August of last year, there was an issue identified in Rails 33667 to replace the use of whitelist and allowlist, and whitelist and blacklist with allowlist and denylist. This is something that David had pointed out, and I was surprised by how many people reacted to this. A lot of people were challenging the original intent of what those words meant, and a lot of people were like, let's do it. We have the privilege as software developers to change how we name things. And in spite of all the things that people were saying, the team that I worked with internally at Clockwork, we decided to go for it. It was an awesome project. It was not hard. We replaced blacklist with denylist, whitelist with allowlist. And we also updated our load balancers and databases to have master, primary, and slave to replica. These were not hard things to do. And there's a lot of things in our repos where we just said, hey, you know what, it's not worth the trouble of doing this, but we will just make a footnote and say that we'll not use this language moving forward. Going through this exercise was actually more beneficial than the work that we did here because our operations engineers kept making mistakes. But there was this mutual understanding and safe place that said, oh yes, it's not blacklist, it's denylist. And we just continued working at it knowing that we would make mistakes. And that's very much the same as the conversation of diversity, equity, inclusion. You will make mistakes. You need to own them, and you need to educate yourself on it and move on. And this also led me to make some personal changes in the way that I use language that I have always used in my entire life. I don't refer to my wife Annie as a wife anymore. I refer to her as my partner. And I learned recently that the term resource is very much rooted in racism and slavery. And I use the word people. I didn't realize how much I used to say, hey guys, all the time. And I use hey folks now. These are things that I'm actually still catch myself saying because I have to undo years and years of having these words stick to my brain. The takeaway with this project was that language truly shapes our understanding of the world. And it's true that naming is one of the hardest things in software development in addition to cache and validation. I recently went through this training of mapping implicit biases. There's a lot of conversation around unconscious bias. Unconscious bias means you just don't know it's there, but the terms that I've started to learn is that it's implicit. Once you become aware of what your biases are, they're no longer unconscious. They're there. And so you have to own it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to manage how those are going to have an impact on your behavior and your decisions. So I'm just want to say that everyone has biases. They're all not bad. And this is something that we have to just manage and respond to. But it starts with understanding what those are. So I'm going to be very vulnerable with you and share some of the biases that I've learned that I've had about myself. That girls are fragile and must be protected. I was very much indoctrinated by the system of patriarchy at a young age, as most men are. And my mom reinforced this a lot. She's like, you need to, be really polite, take care of women so they could take care of you. And having just gone through a little bit of training and having conversations just has given me a new lens to look back in time and see all these things that have transpired that I was completely unaware of. I was also very much taught by my mom, I'm just throwing her under the bus here, that dark skin is bad. She was born in a very poor family in the Philippines where they had to work out, people who had to work outside were considered laborers with dark skin. And if you didn't have to do that, you had lighter skin, it means that you had money. And whenever I'd come back from a tennis match, she'd just tell me how dark my skin was. And she just kept saying that and kept saying that. And I validated this recently by taking a Harvard implicit assumption test, and I have a preference, an automatic preference towards white people over black people, having gone through this scientific test. You should try it. And that's something that is important for people to be aware of. I recently, going through this exercise, found that I have a bias, like a positive bias or a negative bias towards people with not kids, that people with children are responsible and more effective with their time. And I think this is actually something I've heard in the workplace and I latched onto. I'm like, yeah, totally, parents are awesome with their time. They've got no time to mess around. Look at all these people without kids. And I have tempered that. And I acknowledge the fact that that is not fair to anybody that does not have kids. These are only a couple of my biases, but I definitely challenge you to try to do this and be really honest with yourself and vulnerable and share it with other people and how that makes them feel. The biases that I've observed in my life is that I'm an introvert. And I also say that being an Asian American feeds that kind of behavior in myself. And I often feel excluded when I get talked over in meetings. I have to kind of fight it. Something that I found really helpful if when I manage teams or in just my leadership team, is that when we're doing our daily stand-up, we have the equivalent of a talking stick, where you go and you don't interrupt the person. I feel like that seems simple, but if any of you have done a daily stand-up, that's actually quite hard. And that helps people have a voice in an equal way. I feel frustrated when people assume I'm inexperienced or incompetent because of how they perceive my age. I'm 40. I don't often look like that, but people will assume things of you because of how you look. And I often get just where you're from all the time, and I just hate it. It's not great. And no one ever really thinks about, hey, I didn't really intend that. But even the way that you respond to conversations has an impact on people. There's this concept called white fragility, where if you tell somebody, hey, I think that was a racist comment, people will say, oh my gosh, I'm not a racist. I'm a good person. But just by having that kind of conversation of putting yourself as a victim and saying like, whoa, I didn't do that, it has a negative impact and it makes that conversation not safe anymore. I was going to talk a little bit about more about it, but I don't have much time, but it's a great book called White Fragility if you're interested in learning more about it. So I want to ask the question of why should you care about diversity, equity, inclusion? It's okay to have self-interest or intrinsic motivator. It's okay to have a social interest in this. It's okay to have a business interest in it. What I think is important is that it should be intrinsically motivated. You should not be doing it to hit diversity metrics. You should be doing it about what the outcome is for bringing all voices to the table and find that intrinsic motivation. I can't ask that question or answer that question for you. So I've got 7 things here, and then I'll wrap up, to embolden you to act. These are things that you could do. Just pick one towards being a more inclusive human being. Have a candid conversation about diversity and inclusion with all of your people at the table. This sounds simple, but it's actually going to be a hard conversation. If you're not in an organization that feels safe to have a conversation like this, this will be challenging. But it's important to have those voices and have these conversations because maybe that's not the organization for you, or maybe you just need to have an ally in an organization to help you have that conversation. But it will be tough. And I think it's really important for companies to have a gut check to say, are we really living our values? Do we actually have a commitment to diversity and inclusion? It's very easy to say you're an ally. It's very easy to say that you commit to diversity and inclusion. But it's much harder to do that in practice. Get a reverse mentor. So my partner, she's an HR manager at Target, and she participates, she's Taiwanese American, she participates in a reverse mentoring program. We don't do this at Clockwork, but I know they do it at Target, and this is a great program. You learn from somebody from your organization to give you direction, feedback, and guidance. And this is awesome because you could get somebody that in a group that you don't identify with to coach you. You know, I did say that you have to, as an ally, take ownership over your education, so don't make somebody tell you everything. Do your work, but ask them for feedback about what you could be doing better to become a more inclusive person in your own organization. You don't have to wait to have people at the leadership table to do it. You have the voices in your organization today, I hope, to help inform what you could be doing better. And if you're not having those conversations, I definitely recommend that you start doing that. And that's linked to this concept of being an authentic, transparent, and vulnerable leader. Being authentic is really showing that you care, that you really care about these people. And being transparent is around allowing people to see everything that's happening, not in an unhealthy way, but just being open with them. And being vulnerable is about letting them see how things are having an impact on you. Very similar to how I exposed my own biases, puts you in a vulnerable position for judgment. That's what being a vulnerable leader is. We have a flat organization at Clockwork, and this is the type of leadership that we work with. I have 25 engineers that report up into my role, but it's scalable for now. But it's not easy. But we could do that because we empower people to make decisions, and we equip them with good frameworks and a good organizational hierarchy, flat organization to make decisions that they need to do. Take a step into allyship. I had mentioned it's very easy to call yourself an ally, but I'm still learning myself really what that truly means. We've recently switched our email footers to include pronouns, to make that a little bit more of a safe environment. I think it's important to make sure that you don't mandate things because you don't want to be outing people in your organization. We have designated a gender-neutral bathroom in our office. We have an incredibly dog-friendly workplace, but I'm currently chatting with our chief operating officer whether we should. Dogs in Muslim culture are viewed as impure, and having them around the room that we use for our prayer room is a microaggression or non-inclusive behavior. So if any of you have a dog-friendly workplace, maybe reconsider that. Ramadan's coming up right around the corner too. Reconsider happy hours as a ritual. Not everybody drinks alcohol, and a lot of happy hours are later in the day when you have to pick up a kid. So rethink about when you have those rituals. Set norms for group talk. This is around people who have worked together and know things. It's just kind of like those cliques. Like people talk about things and talk about people, and it makes it feel exclusive when you don't know what people are talking about. And this is something that we for sure are working at my company. The retention rate at Clockwork is incredible. My chief operating officer has been there for 13 out of 16 years, and people have been there for decades, and I've been there for a year, and I know very little. But it's very open for them to have conversations and bring me in. And work with vendors that are owned by diverse owners. So we have a race equity action kind of plan where whenever we do events, we focus on getting our food from businesses that are owned and operated by people of color. And that's something that you could easily do by supporting people. Educate yourself. I've already kind of mentioned this a couple times in diversity, equity, inclusion. Formal training or like an online course, there's a lot out there. Feel free to contact me if you need any suggestions. Diversity as an asset is one class that I took that is really fantastic. And mapping your implicit biases, that's a free test on Harvard. You could probably find it pretty easily if you want to do that. I mentioned the project that we did with our team around finding and replacing terms that are non-inclusive. This was a fun project for us, and it started making us think about what other terms should we replace. Like we're starting to like find other terms, and now I'm starting to think about things like target and attack and capture and like words of warfare. It's kind of going a little bit crazy, but it's a fun thing for us to start thinking about. And number 7 is make a call to action in your local community. Our company started the Minnesota Tech Diversity Pledge, where we rallied businesses in the technology industry here in the Twin Cities to pledge to commit resources, energy, and attention to people of color, people with disabilities, women, and LGBTQ. We wanted them to take some sort of action. And we work with these organizations to develop a plan to increase hiring for people that in underestimated groups, educate HR teams, hiring teams, create internal development programs that make it more accessible to underrepresented employees, and share data about demographics in our office to create that transparency of accountability. This is something that you could do in your respective communities. You could check out the website if you're interested in doing that. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you're inspired to seek out tough conversations with the spirit of inclusion, and I hope that you're grasping onto the concept of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I hope you'll do something and act on something that I've shared. So do it. Thank you.